Welcome to the Measure Success podcast, where we talk with top leaders about effective strategies that inspire success. Very excited to have with us today Tom Schwab. He is the founder and chief evangelist officer of Interview Valet, a premium podcast interview marketing service that helps thought leaders connect with their ideal audience. With a background in the Navy, matter of fact, he is a midshipman from the Naval Academy, and entrepreneur. He specializes in using targeted interviews to drive traffic, generate leads, and build brand authority. Tom, welcome to the Measure Success podcast.
Carl, I am thrilled to be here, and I can tell you, when I was at the Academy a number of years ago, I did not figure that I would be doing podcasts. But everything that I learned there, I learned in nuclear power, learned in business, applies to it today. And it's all about, measuring success to get more of it.
Well, and this is, I didn't show you this beforehand. This is where I just ate my email out of, was the U.S. Naval Academy Cup here. This is probably sacrilegious to do this, but I do it often. It's my little memory of and for those who don't know, my third son, Tyler, is a firstie, which is considered a senior at the U.S. Naval Academy. He's going to be graduating this year, become a naval aviator. And so it's always fun, once again, to have people who are in the community and know it's a different world. We're going to go down here past just for a little bit of fun for those who aren't familiar with the Academy. Explain to people who have not gone to academy why an academy is different than a regular university.
Wow, that's a loaded question, right? So the U.S. all the academies are funded by the taxpayer, right? And people say, "Oh, it's a free education." Well, you pay for it all the time, right? And you're there being a full-time midshipman, right? You don't get a whole lot of time off in the summers. It's like drinking from a fire hose. And it's a great experience there. And I will just speak to my experience, right? I was a Midwestern kid, never been more than 100 miles from my home. And then I went to Annapolis, right? And a year later, I had been around the world, seen the world, met so many different people, and it just opened my eyes. And I technically got in there on a clerical error. So, Carl, I have no depth perception, and they didn't figure it out till my senior year. Talk about measuring things, right? And they said, well, you can't be a line officer, which means going into combat and everything. And I was like, yes. And then they came back and said, but we need nuclear power officers. So they said, you can go surface warfare, which is a ship driver, or you can go surface warfare nuclear. And I'll give you a hint. Back then, it came with a $10,000 bonus. So you can picture which one I took. But it was great. I spent 4 years at the academy and then was active duty for 5 years afterwards. And to this day, when somebody says, thank you for your service, I will say, thank you for paying for my education, because I loved it. And I will say also to thank the families, right? Seeing when I was out there at sea, I loved it. I was having fun doing what I was doing, even in, Desert Storm and Desert Shield. The families that have to stay home and worry and take care of everything, they deserve our thanks too. And that's one of the things in our company. 2/3 of our team members are military spouses. Greatest workforce you will ever find. Give them a little bit of flexibility, and they're such a great workforce.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate you sharing all that. And once again, it's such a different world experience, and we're really excited for Tyler to get through and go through. Literally, this recording will be a bit later, but last night was the actual naval selection night, meaning where they select the ship selection. So that was just last night. And so my wife watched it for an hour long and so recorded all the shipmates and company mates that he had, sprint people that he'd been with over the period of time. And so it was an amazing experience. So I want to share with you once again, and I'm not sure how many people who are listening to the podcast know this, but one of the reasons I started a podcast was because my appendix burst. And it's September 2020, and it not just, it burst. So I was in a hospital for a full week. And through that experience, and it was bad. I had an NG tube down my throat. It was middle of COVID. And so my wife couldn't come in and see me. She could literally would throw outside the window, and we're 100 miles away. I was halfway between Portland and Seattle. I lived down more in the Portland area. And it was a crazy event. But after I got through this, I said, I'm going to do three things. I'm going to run a marathon, I'm going to write a book, and start a podcast. And the podcast, by the time I recovered, it was February 2020, I think it started. One of the people and the Workforce Rise 25, they helped me figure this out. And Jeremy Wise, he was a great person to help me figure out like how to do a podcast. And it was really an amazing experience. And what I've appreciated from the experience is getting to meet people like you. I mean, and sincerely, meet these extraordinary people, authors, business leaders, people who have really made a nice small dent in the world, right? This collection of people. And now I can call on them at any time because we have this relationship because they've been a podcast guest. It's something I didn't expect when I first went into it. I didn't expect to have these people of be able to create value and go through things. I'm curious for you, when you decided to go down this path of going into podcast, and you were quite early on, right? And into this kind of stage of doing it. Why did you get into it? What drove you to, hey, this seems like a great idea?
Maybe because that engineer coming out in me, right? I want to get the easiest results with the least amount of effort. And, I've written a whole lot of blogs in my life, and every one of them felt like a homework assignment. But I love talking. And so it must have been right around 2013, 2014, we had sold our last company that we built up with content marketing, right? We were HubSpot's first e-commerce case study. And people started to say, well, how'd you do that? And I'm like, well, blogs don't work anymore. And this was 2013. But I hypothesized, I bet you could use podcast interviews the same way. And so I started to test it and going on other people's platforms, tapping into that audience, getting the know, like, and trust. And people would say, well, when are you going to start your own podcast? And I was like, that sounds like a lot of hard work, right? You got to show up every week, right? I like the flexibility of showing up at other people's parties. So fast forward, we do have our own podcast now, but that was my idea behind it. This is the best way I can communicate what I believe, what we're doing. I mean, you said it in the introduction there. I consider myself the chief evangelist officer, right? I've got friends that are CEOs that deal with publicly traded companies and investors. That's not the job I do. I have to evangelize for our clients, our company, our category. And for me, the easiest way to do that is through talking on stages. And I live here in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Carl, there's not a whole lot of stages around here, but through the internet, you can tap into that, and it's really comfortable doing it from your own home or your own office. So it was sort of playing to my strengths.
Yeah, and talk about something that really worked well is during that COVID period, right? There was a period where many weren't traveling, most weren't, right? And so as a result of that, it's like, how do you still connect with people? And it really turned into a great way to stay connection. And, one of the things I don't mind telling people, and something I was sharing with you earlier, is one of the things that the great opportunities, it's kind of a reverse interview, right? Meaning from the aspect of you bring on a guest, well, they might potentially be a good opportunity for them to do business with and down the road, right? And so instead of it being a sales call, it becomes an interview guest, right? That's the value behind this, right? You're getting to know and learn about them. But at the same time, you then develop, once again, you develop this trust, you develop this relationship that goes through it where you at least know each other are. So where there's this opportunity where perhaps right down the road, they might want to consider, using your business. And it was interesting. I was sharing though also with me, part of the reason I changed my focus a little bit was I wanted my focus to be on the guest, not on myself, quote unquote, selling, right? And so I changed my methodology. And as soon as I did that, we went from have a hard time to find anybody in the podcast. Now we have a 6 to 9 month wait for people to getting on the podcast. And it's amazing of when we changed our focus to be on our guest rather than on myself, if that makes sense. It really changed the way things are. And we have this incredible community that comes with it. Now, Tom, podcasts have grown so much. It isn't true, of course, but it feels like everyone has a podcast about something these days, right? So somebody might be going, man, everybody already has a podcast. Why should I start one?
I
What
would
would you
go
tell
back.
them?
I'd go back to the data. There are fewer podcasts today than there were 2 years ago.
No
And
kidding.
yes,
I didn't know that.
the number of active podcasts has actually gone down. And people will say, well, there's 4 million podcasts. That's technically true. But of those, less than 400,000 have actually published in the last 30 days. It's like so many other things. It's easy to start it. It's hard to keep it going. And so many people will say, I'm excited to do one. And then you talk to them a quarter later, 12 weeks, and ask them about their podcast. And it's like, oh, it becomes an embarrassment. In the industry, it's called podfade. 80% of podcasts die within the first 10 episodes. So,
Wow.
Does the world need another podcast? No. Do they need, another blog, another car model? No. Not if it's just a copy of something there. But if you've got a unique viewpoint, a unique way of doing it, right? One of my favorite things that I sign my emails with is stay strong. The world needs to hear you now more than ever.
Hmm.
And getting a little bit of spiritual here, it's like I believe we're blessed to be a blessing, right? There have been so many people that have come into my life and taught me something, right? And I don't think it was supposed to end with me, right? So the idea is, how can you share that with other people? And maybe 50 years ago, if I went to the pearly gates, I could say, hey, I lived in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Who could I help? But now, with the technology we have, it's like, it's so easy, right? If you're a writer, write a blog, write a book, right? If you're a talker, go on a podcast, start a podcast. And people will say, well, I don't like my voice. Well, get over yourself, right? You don't have to listen to it, right? So, but there's things that you could help with people with. And, what's ordinary to you is amazing to others.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you saying that. And that was literally one of the reasons, key reason we started the podcast is I had this crazy vision when we started 40 Strategy in 2020 is I want to positively impact 1 million people in 10,000 organizations. Well, once again, I'm not going to be able to see and touch and handshake 1 million people, but through a podcast and through it being recorded and through it being out there, people have the opportunity, right, to hear it and pick it up. And it's for me, it's very rewarding when somebody says, wow, that comment they made or that's information you heard. And sometimes it's like, now, Tom, you'll like this one. I was on a podcast 4 years ago, back in 2020, talked about a topic on somebody else's platform, talked about key performance indicators. That conversation from 2020 led to a client that I went to in Houston this past year. That 4 years ago, like literally he remembered it. He remembered the podcast, found it in his email archives, looked me up, went through the process, and ultimately he ended up signing up with us. But there's an example of like something working that had it's sometimes you don't know what you don't know. Like you don't know the seeds you plant, what's going to turn into something exciting, something positive, something to make a difference in other people's lives.
And I think you get to a point in your life where it's like, is this going to be meaningful 2 minutes from now, 2 days from now, 2 years from now? And I can think of a lot of social media posts that I was so proud of when I put out there. And nobody ever finds those anymore, right? That's probably good for the 2 seconds. But I had a client last year and they came on a discovery call so excited because they had seen me on a podcast interview that was video. And Carl, the first question they had was, when did you grow the beard? I said, 2019. Oh, because I saw your interview that you did with Jamie Masters, and that's what got me here. That was like 2017.
Wow.
But it brought it there. And I'm thinking, what else did I do in 2017 that is actually helping somebody today?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a book, something like that. But there's very few things that you have that impact people like that. I can also remember I was flying to an event to give a keynote. And as I was getting off the plane, somebody came up to me and they said, "Are you Tom Schwab?" My first thought was, "Are you a process server?" Right? And I'm like, "Yes, I am." And they said, "Oh, I recognize your voice." It's like, wow. Right? There's a lot of times where I don't recognize people because they look differently, they dress differently, or maybe they've aged, right? But the voice never changes, and that somebody could hear me a row ahead of them and thought, I know that voice.
Wow. Wow, that's impressive. That's pretty cool to get that experience for sure. So today, when you're once again working with somebody new, let's say you work with somebody brand new,
Mm-hmm.
and they're getting to this, and they don't know where to start, and they're like, I kind of want to do this podcast. I'm not even sure why, but I feel like I should be doing it. What type of guidance, how do you help people discern and figure out why should I get into this world of podcasting?
I always ask them why, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody actually wants to run a marathon, right? That's a hard work. Nobody wants to start a podcast. Nobody wants to lose weight, right? It sounds like a whole lot of work. So why do you want to do it? What's the goal? Because if we can have that vision of what we're going to, we can take the actions and have the conversations to get there. But if it's just like, hey, everybody's starting a podcast, I want to start one too, that's going to be a pod fade, right? Or the same way, if people come to us and say, I want to get on a podcast interview so I can make lots of money and be famous, well, they're going to burn out so quickly, right? But if it's like, because I've got a viewpoint that I want to share, because I don't want to be the best kept secret anymore, right?
Mm.
Because I want to get on podcasts because I know when I get introduced to the right people and I get to talk with them, it converts into business. I learned so much from our clients, and there's two that I can think of. One of them, I said, "Why do you want to do podcasts?" And he said, "Because for decades I've been wasting money on marketing, and I don't understand it." He says, "I'm going with the Warren Buffett rule," and I'm like, "What's that?" He's like, "If I don't understand it, I don't invest in it." I'm like, "Interesting." He's like, "I understand. If I can talk to people, they hear me, they'll become my clients." That's what podcast interview marketing is. Another client, I asked him, "Why did you want to do podcast interviews?" And Carl, I love this one. He said, "Because I think most of digital marketing is like advertising above a urinal." And I had to stop and said, "Can you explain that?" And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "People are telling you, oh, you need to be everywhere." And this guy was a high level consultant. And he's like, if somebody sees me on TikTok doing a dance, if they see me, on the park bench, if they see me on a bus, if they see me above a urinal, he says, that's not what they're making their buying decisions. And it actually hurts me. He says,
Mm.
I want to be in the room having the conversations that elevate me. Right. And so I thought that was a great way to do it. And, I always say, my grandfather, God rest his soul, wouldn't understand the technology we're using, but he'd understand the strategy behind it.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. When people start, early people in their podcast process, what do you have to typically coach people through the most?
It's interesting. The best podcast guests that we have found are introverts.
Wow.
And you'd almost think it was the opposite. But those are the people that come and say, who will want to listen to me? What do I have to talk about? They come with this heart to serve,
Mm-hmm.
not where they show up and you ask them, tell me about yourself, and 45 minutes later, they're wrapping up the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And so trying to show them what they know is interesting to other people, not everyone, but the people that they want to talk to, helping them find that confidence, helping them understand their expertise, and getting comfortable with podcasting. After you do a couple of them, after you see the trick, after you see how the magic trick is done, it's much easier. And sometimes even people that are media trained, we've got to help them and retrain them,
Mm.
right? Because I can think of one, Morgan Wright is a fantastic man, cybersecurity analyst. Probably see him on national news 3 times a week. This guy can answer any question, Carl, completely in a 30-second soundbite. And he gets on a podcast, and the podcaster's got 10 questions he wants to ask him. We're now 5 minutes into the interview, and we've answered all of those. It's like, Morgan, tell stories. You can do this. But he was so used to television, and he really, really enjoyed the format.
That's a really good insight that you mentioned there, because TV, I've done very little TV, but it is so different, right? Because you do have to have this 30-second quick, really well stated, clear statement, right? Because that's all you get. You don't get that much more time than that typically to answer anything. While on these podcasts, you're right, the story is what typically resonates. It was on my just recorded one right before this. And, one of the stories we had back and forth, like, wow, that's a story I can remember, which is perfect, right? It's great when you can have these stories that people will remember, because that's what they'll share with other people. It's, sometimes we'll remember a data or a fact, but we'll typically forget it accurately anyways, right? To go through it. But we can remember a story, a lot better. And it is really powerful as going through that. So let's get into kind of some of the nuts and bolts of this. Fortunately, it's amazing too, even just in the few short years I've been doing this, how much technology has improved and made it easier. It's amazing. For somebody who hasn't thought of doing that, or they're thinking about it, and assuming they can figure out basic technology, meaning starting something on Riverside or Zoom or something like that, some type of, what's the cost today? I'm not excluding hiring people, right? What's the cost today to get the technology and to actually do a legitimate podcast?
It's getting so much easier, right? And it used to be, oh, you need the soundboard, you need the mixer and everything, and it was really techy. Right now, it's gotten so easy. The technology has gotten better. We're all used to using Zoom, right? And now there's different platforms out there that give even better recordings. So as long as you've got a decent camera, right? And most of the computers now have great cameras. I've got a special camera, but most of the computers, the video camera is good enough in there. It's more about lighting usually. And then the microphone, you want to make sure that you have what's called a dynamic microphone. Short of getting too geeky on here, there's two types. Dynamic microphone picks up the voice in front of it. Condenser microphone picks up the entire room. So when people are like, oh, you need to soundproof your room and build a studio, and it's like, or you could buy an $80 mic with a USB on it that plugs right in there. Exactly. I've got one that's even smaller than that I travel with, because if I do an interview when I'm in a hotel room, when room service comes in, they probably think, what's going on here? Because I've moved stuff so you can't see the bed. I've taken the lampshade off the lamp so it's better lighting. And then I just, open what's the size of a pencil case, if you're old enough to remember what a pencil case is, and I pull the microphone out, right, and plug it in. So it's not that difficult, right? If somebody starts to say, you need a mixer board, you need this, you need that, don't listen to an audio engineer, right? Listen to somebody that's actually doing it. And, all of the software that's being done, right? Riverside, I love this recording platform. It's a monthly subscription, right? It's not that much. And the other thing with recording, or editing, you can do it yourself right in that platform. Or today, there's probably 2 million people online that know how to do it, right? The gentleman that does our podcast is an Irish man that lives in Barcelona, and he does them over the weekends. And so it's easy to find. You don't have to do that. The technology is not the stopper, right? And so many people are asking, well, what kind of microphone should I buy? That's like asking, Leonardo da Vinci, what kind of paintbrush should I use? It's not about the equipment. It's about thinking through, what do I want to talk about? And really that passion behind that.
So yeah, it's interesting. I upgraded. It's funny. I upgraded last year and spent a little bit more money, but even then it was just incrementally better. But yeah, the mic is still the $100 mic. I got a little light on top of here. I just realized I'm not supposed to have both lights on. Not going to worry about it today, right? I've done a few of these podcasts, not too worried about it. Got a camera it's a little bit nicer than the average, but it still was a $300 camera. It wasn't a $2,000 camera, what you can get, if you choose to go down that path. But all in, I'm like $500, and this is above average, in terms of like the technology. And you add in Riverside, which is less than, not a high subscription at all, right? And it's amazing. And then so now there's the next part, which scares people, and I'm not a technology person by definition, a CPA by trade. So the next part is, well, how do I get it out there? So I'm kind of curious for you, and I'm kind of curious from a trend perspective, how many people are using tools like Riverside where it's automatically editing? You could choose to directly out of a software tool versus what I was used to in the past, where I was hiring a firm or using somebody from a third world country, frankly, to help do the information. Virtual assistants, the nice thing to say these days, right? But what is the trends you're seeing there when it comes to taking that next part to actually production?
It's interesting. We do a report every year called the State of Podcast Guesting. I'm an engineer. We keep track of everything, and we track what platform is being used. And the first year we did it in 2018, I think it was 80% of podcast interviews were done on Skype.
Wow.
Everybody remember Skype?
Oh my gosh, really? That's crazy.
Right? And it was all audio. And then Zoom came in and took all of their market share, right? And this year, Zoom lost about 7%. I think they're down to about 65% of the interviews are done over Zoom, right? People know it; it's easy. But things like Riverside has gotten the most gain with that. There's another one, Squadcast, but it's just this easier platform. It records locally, even if the internet messes up, doesn't matter. We record locally and then push it up there, and it becomes so much easier. And I would, let's go to the Wayback Machine. You remember podcasts? When they first came out, you had to put a cable into the computer to download them onto your iPod, right? I remember.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Yeah, that is old school. Wow.
I asked my two youngest daughters, what's the pod stand for in podcast? And they rolled their eyes and they're like, I don't know, Dad. What's the pod stand for? They don't know a world with an iPod, right? It's just everything streams down. It streams to the car or whatever. So things are getting so much easier. We don't have excuses anymore. It's like people ask, well, how do you upload it to all the different places? Overcast, iTunes, Spotify. Well, you push a button. It's called an RSS, and it pushes it out to everyone, right? It's not magic. It's so easy these days. And once again, once you see how the magic trick is done, you can do it too. And you don't even have to take courses or hire somebody. You can. I mean, there's some nice courses out there, but just Google it, or ChatGPT could probably tell you how to do it.
So today, nearly all of our podcasts have been pre-recorded, meaning we do edits, and we went through a period where we did not very good editing, and then we did really good editing, and now we're using Riverside to do a lot of the editing for us, which is fantastic. And we've literally have completely cut down that cost that we used to have of hiring, once again, a third party to do it. And they get rid of even these ums and ahs and the breaks that we typically have, which hopefully you aren't hearing as much when you listen to this particular podcast today. What I'm curious, my next question is, what do you find better? Do people prefer a clean podcast, or do they prefer, quote unquote, the more natural podcast, or is that kind of something in between?
I think it has to be professional, but in the same way, politics aside, I think we're all tired of over-edited content, right? Is this real? And so I think the raw, authentic conversations proves to people that this is real. not only it proves to people that it's real, but it proves to the search engines that it's real. And I think you see that now. If you look at ChatGPT, where it says sources, click on that sometime. ChatGPT loves long form collaborative content because he knows it's real. This is not a rehash of other things that were out there. This is a real conversation. We're talking about what's happening today, our predictions for tomorrow, our takes on things. And I think that's important to people to also, right? This would not, this isn't AI because I drop my G's too often on ing. I don't always speak in complete sentences, but people know that, right? And I think today in marketing, there's a couple major fallacies that don't work anymore. The first one is all about attention. No, just because somebody knows about you doesn't mean they buy from you. I think it trust counts a lot more than attention.
Amen to that.
So
Yeah,
trust is more important than attention. And then the other one is this thing of you're just one funnel away, right? Everything is automation. And I believe you're one conversation away, right? I'm an engineer. I believe in automation. But if you build it, they will not come. And I think of the best things in my life have always come from conversations, right? My best employees, my best customers, my best referral partners. Heck, my bride, right? She was introduced by a friend of mine. I did not come up with the perfect funnel and run Facebook ads and boom, I was one funnel away. It sounds stupid, but people are trying to run businesses that way. Do you really think somebody's going to hire you as a consultant, as a high-level person to trust with their business just because they saw you on social media? No. But if they heard you, if somebody heard a podcast and said, hey, you got to check this guy out, Carl. Sharp guy. He's the one you have to be working for. That's where business is coming from.
I think that was, once again, really well said. How many people are you seeing? What's the trend, I should ask, in terms of live podcasts where they just literally go live with it versus the recorded podcast? Are you seeing any trends with that?
It's getting fewer and fewer live podcasts. Live podcasts were more popular early in COVID because we were all home. Right now, if you say my podcast goes live every Tuesday at noon, oh shoot, I got to be there every Tuesday at noon, right? Or I've got to find a guest, and the guest isn't always going to be there. And as you know, there's the stress, right? What if all of a sudden the guest doesn't show up? What if they've got technical problems? So our data shows it's 98% of them are done recorded. And those ones that are done live, they're always recorded and then put up later. So there's a platform out there called StreamYard. It's really nice. You can record and push it straight to a LinkedIn Live or a Facebook Live, something like that. And it works out really nice. But then they'll record it, they'll edit it, and 6 weeks later, boom, it's up as a podcast. And it's funny, even if somebody heard it live, 6 weeks later, they'll listen to it again.
No, that's interesting. That's very interesting. I really appreciate that because it's been one of those things I've been debating on, right? Of considering that, going to that live StreamYard type approach and heading towards that. But it's interesting to see it's not as common as you have, as perhaps I thought. I thought it was perhaps a little bit more common. This next piece, which is, and we're only got a few more minutes here, so just timing wise, but one of the challenges is that classic, you've mentioned it kind of indirectly or directly a couple of times, the classic vanity metrics. You and I both know this. You can pay money for people in India to download your podcast and make it seem like it's been downloaded a lot, right? These are things that people do a lot, right? And help bring their numbers up. But that's a vanity metric. It's not actually authentic. It's not actually getting towards, but there's this concern, right? People have like, I feel like I need to be popular. I feel like I need to grow. I feel like I need to be at a certain level, right, to do this, or I shouldn't do it at all. help us out with some of this, like kind of the hidden, the kind of the secret stuff behind the secret stuff of what really matters in how many people are downloading versus how many people are, what really matters.
Yeah. And I think starting back with why are you doing this? If you're just doing it to, make money and get famous, you're going to be disappointed, right? Everybody's like, I want to be Joe Rogan. Well, you don't understand. Joe Rogan was a stand-up comic for years. He was on television. He's the overnight success after 30 years. And if you start playing to that ego, and that's probably that whole social media comparison thing, you're always going to be disappointed. And look for more of the engagement, right? The impact you get. That one person that reaches back and said, hey, I listened to this episode. It really made a difference in my life. Look at the conversations you're having with the guests there. I heard somebody, Dave Jack from, used to be with Libsyn, and he said he wishes that they could turn off the downloads, the metric to see that for the first 365 days, because it's like, it doesn't matter, right? That's not what's important. And if you're just looking at those numbers, you'll get discouraged and then you give up too early. And so from that standpoint, I wouldn't focus too much on that. And, here we are, measure success. And our clients ask the same thing, like, when will I see results? Well, you're going to get the qualitative results as soon as you have the interview, right? That was a good conversation. That was great content that we can repurpose. The host understood me, so the audience will, right? That's qualitative. That's gut feel, right? You're going to get the quantitative once it goes live. And if you do it right, you can attribute the traffic. You can ask clients, hey, where'd you find out about me? Oh, I heard you on a podcast. Okay, that's the results there. But this is a marathon, not a sprint. And I think too many people in digital marketing, and I'd say in business today, are chasing transactions. And there's a big difference between chasing transactions and building a business, right? Chasing transactions, I told somebody, they said, well, how many leads will I get from a podcast interview? And I said, oh, you're optimizing for leads? Yes, we want more leads. I said, then on every podcast interview, tell them to come back to your website to register for a free Tesla. And he's like, well, why will that help? I said, because lots of people will come and register. He's like, well, they won't be good clients. Well, you said you're optimizing for leads, right? So what are you optimizing for? So now you're telling me clients. Well, what kind of clients? Are you optimizing for profits, right? Okay, so now be very clear in what you do, who you serve, and you'll attract the right people and repel the others. So I think it's one of those things of what are you optimizing for? And I think too many people optimize for vanity metrics as opposed to optimizing for profits. And that doesn't mean, just the almighty dollar. But if you're making profits, you're also serving people because they're giving you their money because they see the value.
That's right. Yeah. No, this has been really good. I've had a lot of fun, Tom, talking to you. I love it too. Once again, your expertise that you have in this, and helping people once again to consider doing it. I'm going to fire, and these need to be television answers. Okay.
Right.
For the next few questions here. So number one, what is a great habit that every podcast host should have?
Set the intention beforehand.
Okay, good. Okay. Two, if somebody wanted to read a book, not something that you created yourself, but something that you recommend to others that somebody else has created, what's a good book to learn or listen to how to be better at podcasting?
I'm going to go with one that's not on podcasting. It's called Play Bigger. It's all about category design. You need to be different, not just try to be better.
Good. That's a really good thing. Third, how can people connect and learn more about what you're doing?
Sure. Just come back to Valet with a V.com / we'll put it at measure success, right? Everything that Carl and I talk about will be there. There's an assessment, 10 questions. Will podcast interview marketing work for you? Free copy of my book. You can buy it on Amazon or I'll send it to you. And if you want to talk with me, I'll put my calendar schedule and link there. All of it will be back at valet.com/measure success.
Tom, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the Measure Success podcast today.
Thank you, Carl.
And to everyone else who's listening, I hope you've enjoyed this podcast. We so much appreciate it when you get the opportunity to like, share with others. That's how we continue to get great podcast guests like Tom to be on the show. As we always like to say, wishing you the very best and measuring your success. Have a great day.